Today we are going to discuss cognitivism. The first part of this theory is the understanding of general learning theory and its principles. Cognitivism is the study in psychology that focuses on mental processes, including how people perceive, think, remember, learn, solve problems, and direct their attention to one stimulus rather than others. So basically, it is a complete process which makes people understand what runs behind the mental processes in terms of how people think, how people perceive, how people develop their perception, how they learn, how they solve problems, and also how they direct their attention towards one particular stimulus by avoiding others, focusing depending on the importance of that stimulus. So it's a complete mental process. Psychologists working from a cognitivist perspective then seek to understand cognition. So those psychologists who are working in the field of cognitivism, their approach is to understand the complete process of cognition, the complete process of all these mental processes. The cognitivist revolution replaced behaviorism in 1960s as the dominant paradigm. So it replaced the behaviorism and it gained importance because of its approach to understand the mental processes. Behaviorism was basically focused on the understanding of external factors being responsible for developing of one's learning behavior. But this approach gives way to the understanding of the mental processes involved. Cognitivism focuses on the inner mental activities. So whatever happens in one's mind, that is the focus of cognitivism and cognitivist theories. Therefore, knowledge can be seen as a schema or symbolic mental construction. As you know, the schema is basically the fact that knowledge is organized in different units. According to Mergel, 1998, cognitivism is a process based on the thought process behind the behavior. So if we need to understand a particular behavior, we need to understand a thought behind that particular behavior. A response to behaviorism, that is what the cognitivism is, and people are not programmed animals. So this was basically the assumption of behaviorist theory that people are programmed animals. They can be trained by providing stimulus and looking at their response, by providing opportunities to make them repeat and then reinforcement. So it's basically training and programming people, which was referred to as programmed animals, that merely respond to environmental stimuli. People are rational beings that require active participation in order to learn, and whose actions are a consequence of thinking. Changes in behavior are observed, but only as an interaction of what is occurring in learner's head. Cognitivism uses the metaphor of the mind as computer. Information comes in, being processed, and leads to certain outcomes. So this is what mostly the psychologists who work on cognitivism believe, that cognitivism can be used as metaphor of mind as computer, where you receive the information, you process the information, and based on that, you provide a certain outcome. Three theories come under this approach. One is Piaget cognitive development, whereby children actively construct their understanding of the world and go through stages of cognitive development. So this theory deals with the active development on the part of children in terms of constructing the understanding through different stages. Vygotsky's sociocultural theory based on the developmental analysis where the role of language and the social relation was observed. The third theory is the information processes approach theory, whereby the Green proposes that information processing approach involves three basic steps. They are encoding, storage, and retrieval. So you see the input coming from here and learning takes place here. This is the processing form. And then on the base of this retrieval, you go back to the information which is first served as the input. Cognitivist theory is the study of mental processes, and it involves sensation, perception, attention, encoding, and memory as its key principles. Basically, it focuses on what occurs inside that black box. Black box was a term given by behaviorists referring to mind as it's a black box, or a person is born with blank slate, and all the experiences actually form or they are printed on that black slate. But cognition refers to black box, and emphasis is on understanding what actually happens inside that black box. The key principles of cognitivism is sensation. Sensation occurs when sensory organs absorbs energy from physical stimulus in the environment and send them to the brain. Perception is basically the organization, identification, and interpretation of sensory information in order to represent and understand the environment. So organization, identification, and interpretation of sensory. Attention, based on selectively concentrating on one thing. That is the most important, and it has more importance than the others while ignoring the other stimulus. Now, this is very important part of the mental process where you are attentive to only one thing which you think is the most important for you, and you can ignore others. Encode the information, and this can be done through organizing and then form it in the form of schema. In this case, to encode the information in the form of experience can be conducted through two ways. One is bottom-up, is the way to encode experience by transferring the information that is gained through the external world. It is mediated through attention and perception, while top-down, which is the second way, is to encode just the experience. It is in the form of action, prior knowledge, in order to help in interpreting the bottom-up. Memory is the fifth principle, which says that it refers to ability to keep and remind the information in our mind. Consists of short-term memory, long-term memory, and sensory. Short-term memory consists of limited amount of data, and duration is very short. Long-term memory can hold a huge amount of information and data and rules for how to use and process them, and the information can be maintained for a long time. The way to keep the information can be maintained in this type of memory is by using sensory or cues. To conclude, cognitivism or cognitivist theory is the study of mental processes with the underlying concepts as to how we think and gain knowledge. Sensation, perception, attention, encoding, and memory are the key principles to form the basis of cognitive theory.